Veronica Angeli, who is the current wife of Ellis Mark and the ex-girlfriend of Chris O'Neill from Oni Plays, has just released a 1 hour and 40-minute video responding to everything that was brought up in the Just Stop video, as well as going in depth on some insane things that former friend of Oni, Rice Pirate Mick, was doing to try and sabotage Veronica and Mark's relationship, as well as Veronica and Chris's relationship prior, because he is that desperate to date her for himself. All while he's living with another girl who actually loves him, but only returns that affection in order to get back at Veronica and make her jealous whenever she rejects him, which causes this girl to build up a lot of resentment against Veronica, causing her to cut herself in order to make Veronica feel bad about Mick expressing his love to her, and eventually leading her to make an entire thread on Twitter trying to expose her as an abuser, which ended up being the catalyst to why Just Stop made that video on Veronica and Mark's marriage in the first place. And also, according to a new video by Just Stop, he was pushed into making that video by another YouTuber called Daft Pina, because Daft Pina is mad that Veronica called him a cuck once in a private call that he wasn't even in. Yeah, this situation is a complete clusterfuck. And in Veronica's video, she showed all the proof to back this up, and I'm just sitting here like, holy shit. Not only is this whole situation crazy with the Just Stop and Daft Pina stuff, which is pretty insane on its own, but the Rice Pirate Mick stuff? Oh my god. I have to talk about that in particular. The Just Stop Daft Pina stuff, I pretty much already talked about it in length in another video responding to the video Just Stop put out on Veronica and Mark's marriage. I guess the new information is that Daft Pina was the mastermind behind that, and one of his many motives for having that video made was because Veronica called him a cuck.
You want to know what I did to Daft that made him hate me so much? I called him a cuck private to friends back in 2020. Those who joked along and agreed. After having a falling out with one of them, they would decide to go to Daft themselves and tell him what I had said. To which he approached me about this. I never denied it and told him that the person that he got this from had joined in too. The worst I'd done to Daft since was send him this image.
I don't know about you guys, but if I was disrespected so much to be sent an image like that, I definitely would go out of my way to convince an 18-year-old to make a video exposing this person's marriage. Dude, Daft Pina has to be the stupidest motherfucker on the planet, and there is ample proof from multiple people that this is the case. If you want to learn more about his involvement in particular with this, you could check out Just Stop's recent video addressing it, or the last chapter of Veronica's video where she goes more in depth. But for this video, I want to talk about someone who is actually more pathetic than Daft Pina. That being Rice Pirate Mick. The guy who is such a big simp for Veronica that his toxic lust for her is what caused this entire shit show to start in the first place. So Rice Pirate Mick is known online as a Newgrounds animator who hung around people like Chris O'Neill, Corey Spaz Kid, Zach Psychic Pebbles, Ego Raptor, etc. You know, that group of people. So Mick ended up meeting Veronica through her being the girlfriend of his at the time friend Chris O'Neill, aka Oni and G. But despite the boundary being set of her already being in a relationship with his friend, that didn't stop him from lusting over her hard.
There would be occasions where Mick would try to convince me to leave Chris prior to the breakup. I did tell Chris the nights this happened, so he was fully aware. Some of our mutuals would warn me about Mick and his tendencies, especially around how he treats women and alcohol. As when we would all hang out, back when Chris and I were together, Mick would constantly give me back rubs, touch my neck, and get very close to my face when speaking to me. There would be multiple occasions where our mutuals would tell me his way of describing me was like I was a piece of meat to him. Here's a good example of his obnoxious and flirtatious behavior while drunk.
Those are some beautiful pictures. Very beautiful pictures. Very well done. I just can't help but see... Num 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 num.
And this is something he's willing to post on Twitter. In real life, this was much worse.
This man was born in 1980 and responding to modeling pictures of his friend's girlfriend by saying this.
Num 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 num.
I don't know, dude, what? And apparently that isn't the worst of it. Not only is that weird and creepy, but it's fucking cringe.
Fuck you! What the
So, as many of you guys know, especially due to the fact that Veronica's now married to Mark, obviously Veronica and Oni ended up breaking up eventually, which ended up being pretty messy, with Veronica cheating on Oni. And instead of Mick backing up his friend, he instead tried to use this as an opportunity to slide in with Veronica by bringing her on a fancy boat trip where they could romantically shit-talk Oni.
Chris and I had been in a relationship for 3.5 years. We were on and off, and towards the end of our relationship, we both knew that we didn't like where it was heading. My biggest fault in this was my lack of communication with him and my assumptions of his intentions. I assumed that Chris was trying to reach out to an ex, one in which he had cut off from me after I had demanded him to. I should mention that this was somebody who was extremely sick, and this was somebody who was also very important to him, so cutting them off made Chris feel worse. I was so insecure that I didn't care what the matter of their friendship was at the time. I just wanted him to cut her off so he could focus only on me. A friend would admit to me that Chris had been reaching out to her. This friend had romantic feelings towards me. My insecurities were through the roof, heightened more so by my excessive drinking, causing more stress upon Chris, which had made him feel, why did I cut this person off I cared for a woman who makes me feel this way? Stressed out all the time. I felt like everything was spiraling and that I was losing the person I loved the most. My anger and irrationality had made me impulsive and self-sabotaging. To me, at this point, the relationship between Chris and I had already ended in my mind. I assumed he didn't care about my feelings, so I wasn't going to care about his, and cheated on him with this friend. I was assuming and irrational, and this is something I completely regret. Despite Chris and I breaking up, I still kept in contact with a lot of our mutual friends, Mick Lauer being one of them. A month after my breakup, Mick would invite me on the boat trip. He posed this as, hey, if you want to go, you're on the way down to the dock. I could swing by and pick you up. I didn't think much of this gesture, mostly that I'd never been on a boat like this before, and I had figured that it would have been nice to get out and see the ocean. Chris knew that Mick had taken me on this boat trip and rightfully assumed that Mick was trying to be sneaky and swoop me up after this breakup. Mick would also tell our friend group that Chris was crazy to think that he was trying to date me. Chris sent Mick a strongly worded message, which at the time I felt was unjustified in assuming, but in hindsight, he was completely right. And so he reasonably saw this boat trip as Mick finally making his move on me. This is what sparked Mick and I to become closer, because now we both had a mutual disdain for Chris and would frequently shit-talk him together while making jokes at his expense.
But Mick's insane lust for Veronica didn't just stop at betraying his friend, but it actually got to the point where he spent over 6 figures just to buy a house for him and Veronica to live in before Veronica even knew that Mick seriously wanted to pursue a relationship with her.
Around this time, Mick is given $1 million from a family member for him to buy his own house. He would proceed to spend that money and purchase a home in Burbank. He would later admit to me that he had bought this house envisioning that I someday would be living in it with him. I was not aware of his strong feelings towards me at this time, yet he still spent a large sum of money for a house with the intent of me living there. And just as our friend said, he had his eyes set on me. One night, while helping him build furniture in his new home, we would drink White Claws with vodka in them, which our mutuals and I would call Mick tricks, seeing as he was the one to introduce this combination to us. During this night, Mick would jump on top of me trying to make out with me, and I'd let it happen. Eventually, it would lead us to almost having sex, but because he was so drunk, he couldn't perform. Feeling confused and a little uneasy about all this, I drove home. Not because I didn't consent, but because I didn't look at him this way, and all of this was happening way too fast. At this point, I go to Ireland to meet my friend Mark.
So Mick spent upwards to $1 million to buy a house with the intent of eventually marrying Veronica and living there with her, only for her to fly to Ireland to meet up with Ellis Mark, who later ended up becoming her husband. Damn, that's gotta sting. Fuck, dude. Holy shit, Mick. What? Like, I could imagine some Discord virgin saying, if I got $1 million, I would buy a house to marry and live with the girl of my dreams in. But Mick? 40-year-old ass fucking rice pirate Mick simping so hard for a girl that doesn't even know he has feelings for her that you not only betray your friend, but use $1 million to specifically buy a house for the two of you to live in. Honestly, I'm surprised this guy doesn't have a neckbeard.
I would come back to LA and things would continue between Mick and I as friends. Mick was completely aware that I was in a relationship with Mark at the time. And because of this, he felt that he should finally express his feelings towards me, that he loved me, and that he didn't know what love was until he had met me. Which you can all understand is pretty inappropriate.
Okay, I have to stop the video here and show you some of these messages because, oh my god. The desperation to stop Veronica from dating Mark and date him instead is just palpable. Veronica, you were a badass. You are beautiful, and your personality and heart are so uniquely extraordinary that your company alone inspires so many others to live with adventure and love more fearlessly. I have never known anyone like you, and I have never loved anyone more completely, more than I ever knew possible. I was so happy with simply appreciating and being so grateful for you and your company. That was and is enough, and it will always be enough. I really truly couldn't ask for more, but another feeling hit me out of nowhere. The most unfamiliar sensation just swept over me, like a wave swallowing my entire body. I had no intention of feeling this way. How could I? I never thought it actually existed. Not just love, I feel that all the time, but being in love. I thought it was a myth, something others simply wrote and talked and sang about, a mass delusion that people bought into in order to convince themselves that what they felt was more than simply being infatuated or hormonal or chasing a fantasy. But I was so fucking wrong. It is real, as obvious as it may be to others. I know that now. I can actually feel its weight in my body. It lives in the pit of my heart, spreads to the edges of my skin, and constantly occupies my mind. Romance movies and love songs suddenly feel all about what I'm experiencing, when before I always felt like a third party watching the sweet, but not completely relatable stories of others. And at its core, it's such a simple feeling. Simple, but so massive. I want to make you happy. I want to see you happy. That I would do anything I can without hesitation to make that happen. And most importantly, knowing that even if I can't be as close to you as I would hope, it wouldn't stop me for a second from wanting all these things for you all the same. I can't imagine anything but this to be called in love. And you've let me experience this. Thank you for that. For sharing a part of your light with me and being the one who inspired me to discover this feeling, to understand that it is real and to become a more complete person. I don't throw promises, words, or emotions around lightly, even to those I don't care for. And I hope at the very least, these don't just come off as a lot of words to you, but that you have in some way actually felt my intentions through my actions, like me trying to drunkenly fuck you in the house I bought for us. You are loved. You are cherished. Every part of you, your heart, your passion, your honesty, your humor, your eyes, smile, laugh, burps, hairy legs. How you see so much beauty in the world, and I will be grateful till my final breath for all that you've given me. No matter what happens, if this is as far as we go, I know a part of me will always be in love with you, because I've only ever felt this way towards you. I can promise that I will do everything in my power to never let it get in the way of what I want most, for you to be happy. I will always be here for you in any shape, form, or capacity you require. It's the least I can do, and nothing would make me happier. Veronica responds by friend-zoning him, but saying she still cares about him. And he responds, I meant it when I said nothing had to change. The idea of not having you in my life as the close friends we are now would be infinitely more crushing than learning to deal with being in love with someone that doesn't feel the same way. That's the other side of this in love thing, right? Was gonna have to learn about it sometime. Yeah, no shit, you're fucking 40 years old. What? Just the thought of you not being in my life makes me physically hurt. Seriously. Like, I hope I don't have a heart attack on this plane to Dallas, cause this flight sucked so much already. So unless you don't feel comfortable with me anymore, I'm not fucking going anywhere, dude. I knew you didn't feel the same way. I wasn't trying to get an answer or force your hand, or change your mind, or convince you. I genuinely just needed to expel the thoughts and feelings from my body and let you know. And now you do. Now I do. Now we do. Do we do? And then he keeps going and going and going like, dude, you already acknowledged that she doesn't love you back. Shut the fuck up. I don't know. Like, she literally just started a relationship with another guy. What are you doing, dude?
Mick was completely aware that I was in a relationship with Mark. But Mick would never fail to remind me of his undying love, despite me constantly trying to set boundaries. Mick pulls me aside, earshot away from Mark, and expresses to me that despite me being with Mark again, that he loves me, and he always will love me, and everything that he does means that he loves me. Mark and Sunny can clearly hear what he's saying, but this is Mick's house, and Mark didn't feel at the time that he had any place to say anything. Mick then continues to motion to Mark saying, I don't know how long this is gonna last, but just remember I will always love you. Mick later says a similar thing to Mark's face, saying, I don't know how long this is gonna last, but if you need to, you can always use my recording booth.
I love how confident he's acting that Veronica and Mark's relationship wouldn't last, only to have Mark end up marrying Veronica, and Veronica today outing him for all of his completely pathetic advances towards her, all while this is happening in the house that he bought specifically to live the rest of his life with Veronica in. The false confidence and the desperation of this man is unmatched. I swear to God, I have not heard of anyone who is more simpy and desperate than Rice Pirate Mick.
Despite being with Mark, Mick would let his feelings towards me be known, to the point where I was beginning to feel like this was something I shouldn't overlook. Mick buys a dog around this time named Jojo. This wouldn't be worth mentioning if it weren't for the one conversation I had with Mick sometime after our breakup, where he admits that he had gotten this dog for me. That every time he looks down at Jojo, he feels a little guilt because he had gotten the dog for the wrong reasons. Again, Mick and I were not together when he had gotten this dog, and as far as he knew, we were never getting together, yet he bought both a house and a dog with me in mind.
Dude, what's next? Is he gonna adopt a kid and be like, oh, I bought this for you, but I didn't actually want to be a father. I was hoping you'd be the mother to this kid. A dog and a house. Jesus Christ, he is so down bad. He knows she's dating Mark. What? Oh my God.
But in reality, it comes off creepy and manipulative, making such massive decisions to woo a girl who had been trying to make it clear that she wasn't interested. Like before I went to Ireland, he gave me $300 out of nowhere. I'd forgotten my Apple Pencil, and so he shipped one all the way across the world along with 4 packs of cigarettes because he knew mine had gotten stolen. Nice on the outside, and I appreciated it, but he was doing so much for me. I can only assume, so I would consider being with him. And while I was in Ireland, he was filming the Markiplier video. So he would constantly send me messages where he would get the cast and crew all to say my name.
Hey, Veronica. Hi, Veronica.
Hey, Veronica, what's up? Hey.
Oh, hey, what's up, Veronica? How you doing?
Hi, Veronica.
It was incredibly overwhelming. He wanted to make his love as obvious as possible.
Dude, it just keeps getting worse. Veronica told him straight up, I don't love you, but you're still my good friend. She's in a relationship with another man. And when she wasn't in a relationship with Mark and was hanging out with Mick on his boat after breaking up with Chris, she still didn't want to get with him. And yet he keeps pushing with all these grandiose gestures of affection, saying that he didn't discover love until he met Veronica. 40 years old, by the way. But eventually, his persistence actually paid off for a bit. Yes, Veronica eventually dumped Mark for a bit to actually give Mick a chance. And obviously, we know how that turned out, considering that she's now married to Mark and made this video on Mick. But just for fun, let's see how much Mick fucked up after finally succeeding at his multi-year-long struggle to be with Veronica.
After a week or two, I once again ended things with Mark, secretly for the intention of starting a relationship with Mick, because I felt at this time that I had loved him, and this was something I just couldn't overlook. When you're being reminded constantly of this person who has this undying love for you, it's hard not to start considering it. And now we're together, and this is exactly what he wanted. Mick takes it upon himself to make sure everybody is aware that we are together. Going on Twitter and commenting on my posts, calling me babe, which I always hated. Making sure that he would say I love you and post to me, and conveniently picking me up outside the bathroom door while Mark would be in there, only for Mark to come out and see us together. I was the trophy, and he had just won me. Let me remind you that this is somebody who had told me I should break up with Chris during our relationship, and had also given me unprompted back rubs. Somebody our friends would later tell me described me as a piece of meat. Somebody who would love bomb me, even though they knew I was in a relationship with Mark. Somebody who had led on Smokey, only to ditch her the first moment I offered my hand. And we'll soon see. Somebody who continued to tell me that they loved me after our breakup, and when I would try to establish boundaries, they didn't care about it. They didn't care about Chris, they didn't care about Mark, and he didn't care about Smokey. He just wanted what he couldn't have until I finally gave in. Which leads me to an interesting time where we all took a trip to the Natural History Museum. I'd asked Mark, Strawberry Mage, Mick, and Smokey if they all wanted to go, and we all went together. Mark and I had a fun time joking around, but any time that we'd be giggling to one another, Mick would instantly come in and try and interject, to be a part of whatever we were joking about. There's a point where at the end of the museum, we all go to the gemstones area, and Mick would come up to me and be like, what do you think about that one? This was a similar type of behavior most men would do in trying to find the right type of ring for a woman when looking for engagement rings. This was the tone that I would receive from him, especially because a couple weeks later, he would ask me if I would like to have a wedding in the Shire, just because I had a tattoo that said the Shire. And then I'd be like, I don't know, I guess so, to which he would say, oh my god, are we talking about this? This was the behavior I was getting. Instantly, he wanted me to move into his house, and already he's trying to talk about wedding stuff. This was too fast and making me incredibly uncomfortable. So, remember how I had mentioned that Mick wanted me to move in? Well, he had offered me that, as well as re-landscaping his whole yard so all of my dogs can come live with him. I'd tell him that I would consider it, but inwardly, things were moving way too quick, not to mention how uneasy this relationship has already been starting off. Especially considering that this girl that Mick would fuck is staying in his house, who clearly loves him, and he won't put his foot down telling her to leave. He would say cringy love things to me like he had gotten them from a movie. It was obvious now that we're in a relationship that what I loved about him wasn't what he actually was. Almost like everything shifted. Tell our friend Strawberry Mage that I'm not going to be on Discord very much, seeing as every time that I would interact with Mark in calls, he would be extremely standoffish with me. Understandably so, but it made me feel unwelcomed, so I would tell him that I wouldn't be around. Strawberry Mage would relay this to Mark, which would prompt Mark to call me, saying that he didn't intend on making me feel like I needed to distance myself from my friends, and during this call, Mark would give me the most harshest and realest talk I've ever had. He would express to me that I'm wasting my life, that I'm drinking every day and doing nothing at Mick's, that I have all this potential and I'm not doing anything with it, and if I keep this going, in 5 years' time, it will hit me like a huge truck. I knew he was right about everything, and I tell him that he was right and I really needed to change. Again, Mark was the only one to ever give me a reality check like this. I break up with Mick a few days later, expressing to him that I really need to focus on myself, that how we're continuing things is incredibly unhealthy, that I'm not happy, and I feel like I'm very stressed out.
Veronica and Mick were only dating for 1 month, and in that time, Veronica ended up being so unhappy that she agreed with her ex when he said she was wasting her life away with him. Wow. I mean, Mark wasn't wrong, and I'm glad Veronica agreed with him, but the fact that she did, damn Mick, damn, you really need to get better at seducing women, like holy shit. Anyway, something you might have noticed being brought up sporadically throughout the clips I've been showing you is this girl Smokey, who is living at Mick's house and is in love with him while Veronica and Mick are together. This person previously had sexual relations with Mick prior to him getting with Veronica, but their budding relationship got cut short once Veronica gave Mick the go-ahead to start dating. This upset her a lot and was the catalyst to this all becoming public, as in November of last year, Smokey decided to make an exposed thread on Veronica, which Daft Pina then saw, showed to just stop, and got them to decide to make a video on Veronica under the guise of helping LS Mark, which is what Veronica is mainly responding to in this video. And oh boy, this part of the story, it's not as funny as the Mick stuff, but it is pretty crazy and also highlights the obsession that Mick has with Veronica and the people he is willing to hurt in order to get what he wants.
Smokey had still not left for Vegas, almost a month passing by, living at Mick's. She started to grow feelings for him, and they began to start fucking. There were times I had met up with Mick and Smokey, where she would outwardly try to claim what was hers. She'd wrap her arm around him when we go for walks, or she would rub his thigh under the table staring at me. When Smokey would get up to use the restroom, though, I would look at Mick and say, "What's going on?" To which he would exclaim, "I don't know, she just started doing this out of nowhere." Smokey would try planting her roots, ironically with plants. She'd buy tons of orchids and fill them in his home, decorating it as if it belonged to her. This was a regular joke between Mick and I, as he didn't seem to care for it and would call Smokey a wife he didn't ask for. I would go over to Mick's and talk to Smokey, to tell her that I was in love with Mick and wanted to pursue him. I knew that this would upset her, but I wanted to give her the courtesy as my friend to tell her this before telling Mick. Smokey takes it upon herself to immediately go behind my back and tell Mick what I had just shared with her, in hopes that she could remind him that what they had was special, and hope that he would consider her over me. Mick would eventually tell me that this happened, to which I had no proof, but luckily Smokey provided it in Just Stop's video, so here it is. Smokey talks as if her blessing was the deciding factor in all of this, when in reality, if she outwardly didn't approve, Mick had wanted to be with me for months now, vocalizing to me that he loved me whenever he could, and again, even in front of Mark. Smokey knew that she didn't want to leave, evident from the fact that she had stayed at Mick's house until January, and if she made it clear that she was unapproving of our relationship starting, the most natural thing to do would be to pack up her stuff and start moving into her new place in Las Vegas. But she wanted to stay at Mick's and witness our relationship, hoping that she could still play some part in it. She would later admit to Mark that she didn't want to go to her new place, as everything would be moving on without her. Smokey would start ramping up her drinking even more than we normally did. She would act like everything is fine and fun and happy for us, expressing at one point during LA Comic-Con that she loved seeing me and Mick kiss each other, which I thought was really weird. But as our nights would continue, she would break down, crying, getting sadder and sadder. but insisting it wasn't having anything to do with me and Mick being a couple. It's the first night Mick and I would be sleeping in the same bedroom together, and Smokey would be forced to sleep on the couch. We would obviously drink that night, ending the party with me and Mick going back into his room, and Smokey consistently drank and was blasting music until 5 a.m. Smokey would then ask me to go outside and have a conversation with her. So I stepped outside with Smokey, and she would say, I shit you not, verbatim, now I did something last night, and I don't want you to think it's because of you and Mick. I'm just a little depressed, and I was thinking about Edward, and I had a sad girl moment. She lifts up her sleeve, exposing her forearm, covered in cuts, all the way down. This was the point where I was like, holy shit, I need to get out. This right here is manipulation. She wanted me to see how much she was suffering because of how much rejection she was facing and nobody picking her first. This is how she wanted to get my attention, not by a conversation where she was honest, but by self-harm. I receive a snap message from Smokey. Smokey asks me if it's okay if she has a closure night with Mick. At first I figured this was just a night for her and him to talk and watch movies and hang out, but upon clarifying what she had meant, she's outright asking me if she could fuck Mick one last time for closure. Angry, I call Mick and asked him what his response was. His response was, oh, well, you should go ask Veronica. This was a second big red flag that I'd gotten from Smokey. My so-called best friend, who had just revealed to me that they had cut themselves because of this person, is now asking me if they could fuck my boyfriend for closure. And my boyfriend is considering it so long as I'm okay with the idea.
Bro, no way, dude. Mick, multiple years trying to woo Veronica, get her out of the clutches of Oni Plays and LS Mark, finally gets the girl, and then he's like, well, if it's okay with her, I also want to fuck this other chick. What? Really? Bro, you are so fucking horny. Oh, I found out what love really was through Veronica. But it also would be cool to, have a quick fuck in this other girl. What the fuck, dude? If you really fell in love with Veronica and felt the true meaning of love through meeting her, I don't think you'd be eager to cheat on her or have sex with someone else, even if it's consensual with Veronica. I don't really think that's how love works, but I mean, what do I know? I'm only 25 and Mick is 42. He has quite a few years on me. Maybe he knows something I don't.
I still try to be friends with Mick during this period. He is still somebody I cared about, and I had no intentions of cutting him out of my life, even taking care of his dog Jojo while he went to Philly to spend time with his friends after the breakup. When Mick comes back to pick up his dog, he asks if he could speak outside, and so we go to the park and talk about his feelings. This is when he would admit to me that he had gotten his dog for the wrong reasons. During this talk, he would ask me again if there was somebody else, to which I would respond that while I didn't leave him for anyone, that over time Mark and I had expressed that we still had interest in one another, me planning on going to Ireland with him in April. Mick gets really upset and asks if me and Mark had been doing anything sexual, to which I'm honest and I say yes. In retaliation, he says, well, I guess I'll just go fuck Smokey then. She was going to be coming into town soon. I explained to Mick that I didn't feel that this was fair to her, that he had witnessed how badly she had been affected by Edward and him in the past, and if he was going to fuck her and didn't love her, then that would just be evil. His only response to this was, yeah, well, that's not any of your concern now, is it? This is the real Mick. The one behind the nice guy positive persona he portrays online. He didn't care if fucking her would eventually hurt her. He just cared about getting back at me.
That has to be one of the most childish mentalities. I'm gonna fuck someone else just to get back at you. I mean, it happens all the time, but whoever does it is kind of immature. But not only is Mick immature, but he's also a raging man baby. Just listen to what happened when Mick and Veronica ended up meeting up again briefly at a party in LA.
Out of nowhere, Mick asks me, so, when's O'Neill coming back into town? Seeing as he was in Ireland at this point. Considering Chris and I had been broken up for about 9 months at this point, I was baffled at how he thought I would know. I retort back saying, yeah, wouldn't you know better? You've talked to so-and-so. Referring to the friends who distanced themselves from him because of his excessive drinking and how easily he would burst into arguments with them. Mick got very upset when I said this, and I said this to hurt him, because clearly him bringing up Chris was intentionally to hurt me. Smokey and Mark stood there as Mick yelled in my face, saying how all these friends had cut him off, how he had moved out here for all of them and they all turned their backs on him, that I, above anybody else, should know that. Which was the reason why I brought it up. I knew that he would get hurt by this, but only because if he was going to be petty about bringing up Chris, I was going to be petty and bring up our friends. But I wasn't reacting this way. He was reacting this way. When Mick got drunk, he got angry and performatively loud. He paced back and forth, not wanting to let this go, pointing in my face and continuously shouting at me, eventually calming himself down for a brief moment to say bye. and then came in for a hug. I would give him one of those half-assed pat-on-the-back hugs, which caused him to get mad all over again, shouting, "No, no, you can't do that!" After he walks away screaming, "I don't have patience for this!" Walking further down the road being like, "Fuck!" It's a good thing that Mick left me a voicemail that night, clearly still drunk, trying to justify yelling at me, which he defines as him escalating the situation, and ultimately saying that he won't apologize.
Yo, listen, I apologize if things escalated to a certain point, but I will say that pointing out the whole and entire friend group thing as not being a situation that impacted me to a certain degree, especially because they were the people I moved out here for, that hit hard. I did drink tonight, but at the same time, I just feel like there was a certain amount of energy that was not as empathetic as I would have hoped, and it came off as pretty fucking cold, considering everything else. You know what? Not even considering everything else, but yeah, that bothered me. So I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for being fucking bothered by that. The fact that it escalated as it did, that's a bummer. I really hoped that it wouldn't, but I just figured you understood better than most.
Bringing up that your friends don't like you anymore is cold and harsh, but he can go and fuck a girl who's in love with him just to get back at his ex, even though he doesn't love the girl who he's fucking back, and do all this other cold-hearted shit like flex that he's with Veronica in front of Mark, who is heartbroken at the time. What an actual man baby. Now, one of these people who of course cut Mick off is Chris O'Neill himself. Why wouldn't he after everything I just explained? So Mick had this brilliant idea of confronting Chris at the Smiling Friends launch party. And this doesn't highlight how evil Mick is, but it does highlight how fucking stupid and pathetic he is. Just listen to this.
For those unaware, the series Smiling Friends was premiering on Adult Swim, and there was a big release party for only the cast and crew to celebrate. Mick had been messaging me earlier that day, telling me that he looks forward to running into a particular person there, obviously referring to Chris O'Neill. Mick opens up his jacket to reveal a Smiling Friends t-shirt, telling everybody at Pedro's that he had just gotten back from the release party. He proceeds to say how he has a funny story, that he saw Chris O'Neill at the party, that he walked right up to him and went to him and shook his hand. And according to him, that Chris was scared, shaking where he stood, gasping. Mick then would say that he shook his hand pathetically, and then he walked away laughing, while Chris would be standing there alone for the rest of the party. I didn't like this, but not for the reasons Mick thought.
The Smiling Friends party. For some reason, it hasn't been brought up, but I have a feeling that was a source of some contention, and I specifically the I shook Chris's hand thing, which seemed to upset you in the moment. I wasn't sure if you were exaggerating how you felt at the time, but I have since heard that no, that actually did bother you. I don't know if you get what I was saying when I said I did that. And I just wanted to clarify that that was very much a power move. Hey, I'm coming into the lion's den, and I'm not afraid of you. Like, I don't care what fucking influence you had over everybody else. I'm going to fucking address you. You can't, like, I'm not just going to, like, shy away. You know what I mean? And it was probably the most uncomfortable he was that night, and I expected that.
Yeah, Mick, you really intimidated him. It's not like everybody who had witnessed it later said that your display was sad and cowardly. Let me give you a description from a friend's point of view, who had witnessed all of this. Mick saw Chris at an open bar with one of our friends. Mick beelined to him, even pushing his way through somebody else to get to Chris. He offered his hand and in a cracked voice said, "Hey!" Instantly, it was apparent to them that Mick was drunk, and immediately turned around and walked away. Chris had no idea what had even happened because Mick fled so fast. "You really showed him, Mick. I can't believe you were willing to walk into the Lion's Den and say, 'I'm not afraid.'" The Lion's Den being Chris O'Neill at your friend's premiere party. Chris didn't even touch his hand. They all thought this was a pathetic display. Even with this failed attempt at a confrontation, the night went on without anyone really even realizing or caring that Mick was trying to confront Chris. Despite what Mick likes to think, Chris nor anybody was affected by this so-called power move.
He really thought he did something there. He really thought he did something. If you want to learn more about this, you can go and watch Veronica's full 1 hour and 40-minute video. But for now, I'm just gonna stop because it's too much. It's too much. I can't believe this guy is a real person. But based on the evidence that Veronica showed in her video, everything checks out. At least from what I can see. If you have any differing opinions, be sure to leave them in the comment section below, or any other type of thoughts you have, because this is just insane, and I had to share it with you guys because, wow. I have never seen a man stoop so low just for an ounce of pussy. If you want to learn more about the Just Stop portion of this entire drama, there's a video I made discussing it with Willie Mac Show, and we're probably going to discuss this as well with him on the channel later on, so if you don't want to miss that, be sure to subscribe with notifications on. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.